Hello, I'm Billy, the Whisky Exchange Ambassador, and I'm joined today by John Laurie, who is the Managing Director of the Glenturret. So, hello, John, how are you doing?
I'm good, Billy. Thanks very much for having me. I'm doing great today. Thank you.
Excellent. So, the Glenturret is in the process of entering this new era of distillation and whiskey and everything. And we've got some fantastic new whiskies hitting the website. So, I wanted to have a chat with you to learn a bit more about the distillery now that it's its own thing, going out on its own and doing its own thing, but also learn a bit more about the whiskies. So to start out with, so do you want to tell me a little bit about the Glenturret itself and where it's come from and where it's going?
Yeah, so if I start with the recent history, it's probably the easiest way to bring people up to speed. So we were part of the Edrington Group, and predominantly 50% of what we made was part of the famous Grouse blend. So since 2002, the Glenturret distillery itself was actually known as the famous Grouse experience, and incredibly successful at being a brand activation site for famous grouse. But that's why, we're such an old distillery, but people are really already asking us, why have I never heard of the Glenturret before? And that's why. We were part of a group. We were under the famous grouse banner. In March last year, we were brought over by the Elite Group, our joint venture led by the Elite Group. So that was a very exciting time for us to really take the covers off and start telling the world a bit more about the Glenturret and what makes us special in particular.
Excellent. But one of the things I remember when I've been talking to you and the rest of the Glenturret team about the distillery over the last couple of months since everything's been sort of going on is that, as you say, you're one of the oldest distilleries in Scotland, but there's a lot of history and that you're uncovering even more history now.
Yeah, so since 1950, the Glenturret has had 1775 on the bottle. Because even though we're a famous grouse experience, we always still released the Glenturret as a single malt. It's always been on the market. 1775, that was actually came about from Alfred Barnard in 1880, visited a lot of distilleries around Scotland. There's a great book on his visits. He met with Thomas Stewart, who was a distillery manager at the time. And you can read in the excerpt there that he said that the Glenturret was the oldest distillery in Scotland to still be working, and it had been around since he thought 1775. The Fairley family, who brought the distillery active again in 1950, took that and basically created their brand plan entirely around that, and no reason not to. What a great date to have found and great research to have found. When we were bought over, our owner has history in buying heritage sites. He bought the La Pérogie Sauterne site in Bordeaux and found out that it was classified Premier Grand Cru by Napoleon. So he has a team that he puts into these sites. He bought the Glenturret because of its history and heritage and loved that about it. So the first thing that we did was we got this history team across, and they started with their academic research, because previous to that it was done through some books that we could find and snapshots of history we could go, and a lot of desktop historians on whiskey would say, I found this out, I think it wasn't actually this distillery, I think it was that distillery, and we had nothing to say about that because we hadn't done our own piece of research ourselves. We now have, and it was done in a very academic way, where you go from the contract of sale and follow that signature back to that contract, and follow that signature back to that contract, and follow all the way back. It was an incredibly difficult piece of work because Roland Kisling is the historian, he's Swiss. So to come across here, the first thing he did was to learn about the really complicated history in Scotland, where the records moved from being local authority records to parish records, and then from parish records into being clan records. He had to learn that first before he could really navigate his way around the boundaries lines and I think that's where we went wrong before, because the boundary line between what is now the Glenturret and was the Hosh and the Hosh Mill distillery, which the two distilleries often got their stories got intertwined, that parish line changed a few times, and therefore that was the real confusion in digging our history back. We've now found out that the distillery was in existence in 1763. It was then called the Thuret Distillery, and the rental document that we have found that says we were allowed to not pay rent for that year to the Murray clan was because the distillery hadn't been producing alcohol for that year, but it infers that we've been producing alcohol before that. So we've not quite got to the start of our story yet. That's still an exciting journey that we're on. But we do have this rental document now signed by Patrick of Auchtertyre, Murray Clan, that says that Glenturret Distillery sat on that ground and produced alcohol. Certainly not that year, but was in existence.
So going back all that way, you have this ridiculous heritage now, going back to, as you say, this is the oldest distillery still going now. How has the process of the distillery changed over the years?
It's a really interesting topic, actually, Billy. We are very hand operated. We're very traditional methods. We have an old 120-year-old Porteous mill that still services, and we've got an open top mash tun that's hand roused, and people love to come and see that traditional way of rousing the mash, and it is a beautiful thing to see. But interestingly, when we reviewed Alfred Barnard's book back in the 1880s, the mash tun was roused by a mechanical rouser that was powered by a water jetty. So when the still operators found that out, they're like, "Oh, we're even more back in time than we were in 1880. Let's get a rouser back in again." So yeah, the distillery used to have its own kiln. It used to have its own malt drying floor. That's now where a restaurant stands at the moment. We did used to have the entire distillery powered by water jetties from the river. And actually, we've heard from meeting old stillmen that when they were there, when the car park was getting laid, you could find all the lathes where all the water was pouring through to power the distillery. We're not powered by water anymore.
Unfortunately, I do love a water wheel. So you have this very, very hands-on approach, but also you're quite a small distillery as well, aren't you?
Yeah, we are. So under Edrington in the latter years, we produced 170,000 litres of alcohol per year. We have increased that since the takeover to about 215,000 litres of alcohol a year. We have ambitions to make it to 500,000, but never beyond 500,000. We think that, or we now know from consulting with engineers, that 500,000 litres of alcohol per year would be the number that we can achieve without losing that hand-operated, handmade product that we've got. And that's really important to us. So we're not going to lose that. So we're on a journey to 500,000 litres, but we're sitting at 215 just now, which is very small by comparison.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you look at your former stablemates and everything like that, these big distilleries doing loads of stuff, and still Glenturret sat there as this important but tiny part of that. But now you have the opportunity to sort of go it alone. And part of that is very much these new whiskies that you're in the process of releasing, and which I've seen a few of them, more and more of them are coming in, by the day at the moment. So what's your approach to this new range of whiskey, and how are you going about building this, this beginning of this new era?
So the owners wanted to respect the history and heritage of the site. So they straight away didn't want to change and increase production massively. So therefore, it was never going to be a volume product. It was always going to have to be a value product. It's always going to be something that, if we told the story right, people would appreciate. So therefore, we had to be liquid-led. You can't get that second sale. You can make the bottle look beautiful, and you can encourage people to buy it and gift it off the shelf. And you can do that by repeating your brand and renewing your brand all the time. But if you're a niche product like we are, you want people to buy it because of the extreme quality of the liquid. So the first thing that we had to do was to find the right whiskey maker, and someone that would be up for the challenge, working with a catalogue of stock, being able to assess it and then design what we could take from there. And we were really, really fortunate to be able to get Bob Dalgarno as our master whiskey maker. Bob arrived with us as soon as the takeover happened, and straight away went into the warehouses. And since then, Bob's in overalls every single day. He's in that warehouse every single day. He's nosing. He's pulling the samples himself. He's nosing all the casks. He's deciding which casks he wants to re-rack, which casks he's taking forward, which casks he's going to use now. He knows them. He knows all of our casks now. He's taking the time. He's grafted. He rolls those casks around himself. He took the by hand message to heart straight away.
Excellent. So with some experience like Bob, especially using sort of richer, darker sherry casks and that side of things from his experience with other whiskies in the past, what's at the core of your new range? How has that been put together? What's the ideas behind it?
So we started off creating, looking at the whiskies, looking at the stock model, figuring out what we could put together. Age statements were going to be part of it. We knew that from the start. Liquid lead had to be part of it. But it would have been really easy for Bob to have gone to his history and replicated, rinse and repeat. Let's go European oak sherry casks and let's go back out again. And he didn't do that, to his credit. And I think we've created something different and unique, which was really important to us. Having come from Edrington, having had Bob Dalgarno as a whiskey maker, we needed to show that we were different and not just be seen as a mini of the previous. So Bob started at the new make spirit. Our new spirit is light, it's delicate, it's floral, it lends itself really well to those American oak notes. And we do have some European oak sherry, of course we do, in our stocks, and Bob's going to bring them to the fore. But I think what we are keen to have, and when we did the brand launch, we included a new make spirit in the sample pack because we really wanted to drive that across. That new make spirit is the backbone to our range, and you should be able to nose the new make spirit and nose a 30-year-old and see the family. You should, and Bob talks about them as family. So in our new range, we have a non-age statement. We have a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old peat smoke, a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old, 25 and 30. And Bob talks about them as a family, and they all have their part to play. They all have their different stages, and that's what we wanted to create. Is something that if you're a Glenturret consumer, no matter what part you're at, you can pick out that common theme from the Glenturret.
And one of the things I found really interesting about the range is that you haven't done the normal thing of just saying, oh, we'll bottle everything at 40, 43, 46. Yeah. There's some things in there which are punchier. There's some things in there which are more delicate and lighter in strength. What was that? What was the idea there? Doing these varying strengths across the range.
So that was a big decision to take. Financially, there's implications there. Strategically and logistically, there were lots of considerations to allow that to happen. But again, going back to this whiskey maker, you don't bring in a whiskey maker who has credentials and then limit them to what they can do. What we really wanted Bob to do was to say, where does our 12-year-old, where's it best? If you take it in its whole range of potential ABVs, where is the one that you are the most proud to present it at? And let's start from that point there. And then we backed him. He decided on the ABVs that he wanted to show off. And then we just backed it. We said, okay, let's do that. If that's the best it can be, then that's what we want. We don't want to take it down that couple of percent less to get a bit more bottles out of it. We'd much rather just take that. And that's hopefully, and I say hopefully because that is what we aim to achieve as a brand. And hopefully that comes across, that honesty and integrity.
And the other thing, you having spoken to Bob about this myself, and he was saying, you don't have huge amounts of stock. You're not a gigantic distillery, so these are all small batch whiskies.
Yeah.
And so this is the first release. This is the maiden release that we're talking about at the moment. So what's in the future? I don't expect you to give us a complete sort of like 10-year brand plan, which I'm sure you have knocking around somewhere in a filing cabinet. But what's the plan? What do you guys want to do?
Glenturret's never going to be a large volume product. We do want to get it enjoyed around the world. And in order to achieve that, we need to open up markets when we can manage to supply them. The last thing I want to do is to open up a market and then not be able to supply enough in that product. So there are circa 40,000 bottles in this first year's range. I mean, I know brands that have that in one SKU. So to have 40,000 bottles across all of our range, 25-year-old has 204 bottles completely. It's about picking the right locations and picking the right markets to work with, and building the relationship with them, making sure that the locations that get their allocation are able to tell the story, so the consumer understands that the Glenturret's never going to be a mass volume product. You're not going to be able to get it everywhere, and that for us is similar in other product categories. You know, if you think in watches, you can pick out those watch brands that only do maybe 1,000 or 2,000 a year, but they do it and they do it well, and then people start appreciating that for it. We would love to replicate that type of thing, and not go mass volume, not go into every single market around the world, but make sure that when we're putting it out with integrity.
Well, from having tasted this initial sort of release, this new approach, this beginning of this new era, you're definitely hitting that. You know, the one sort of whiskey I want to sort of dive into, because people might know a bit about the Glenturret, and the 25 and 30 are beautiful, old, elegant things. The no age statement and the 2 age statements, the 12 and the 15, they show off different sides of distillery character. But the one that really intrigues me is the 10-year-old peat smoked, because Glenturret has been a distillery that people have tried to find this peat smoked whiskey, because we knew you had it, and it didn't get out very much until recently. But what can you tell us about that one, and you know how that might increase or change in the future?
Do you know what? It's been. I'm not a huge peat fan, but I can drink our peat because of that light floral, smooth character that Glenturret has. Really smooths it out. We had a lot of peat stocks. The Edrington called it Rougmore. So sometimes you can find some independent bottlings of Rougmore if you can ever figure out how to spell it. And there is some peat out there, and it's really, really nice. It's gone down really well because it's a mainland peat, so it's very floral. And we smoke it. We don't actually use the peat on the fire. The barley is smoked with this peat. And that creates a subtle difference in there. So ppm is very high when it comes into us. We used to do another edition called the peated edition, and it was 30% peated and 70% unpeated. And what we found from the market, and I spoke to Bob about this, was that it didn't really do anything. If you were a peat drinker, if you enjoyed that, that peat taste profile, then you weren't enjoying the peated edition. And if you weren't a peated, then it was too peated for you. So it never really hit any kind of base. So I said to Bob, we either have to do one or the other. Either we don't do peat, and perhaps we use it a little bit in the creations and give it that little subtleness. But he's like, let's just do it. Let's do it and do it properly. So we went in and reversed it. So it's predominantly this peat smoked barley Rougmore, and it's going tremendously well. I mean, France have been selling it for a month, and it's the top seller already. And we have not been known as a peated distillery, like you said. We've never really been known as the Glenturret. It's got a big peat range, but it is the one to watch for our future editions. If you're talking about a brand plan, we've got stocks there to do something with peated, and Bob's enjoying working with it. It's something he's quite enjoying. And our distillery manager is a huge peat fan, so he's pushing that every meeting we go into.
Excellent. Well, I say, the range is interesting. Everything from the peated to the older whiskies, and to this sort of core range, which are just showing off what you're doing now. And with investment, and also people behind you really wanting you to get out there into the world. You say that the future looks really, really bright for Glenturret. But I just want to jump back to the range for one final question for you. What's your favourite whiskey that you've got in your range at the moment, and why?
Yeah. So my favourite is the 12-year-old. I have it at home. It's the only one I have at home. And it was from the start. It was one of the ones that from the very start, as soon as it was on the bench and Bob was inviting us in to come and see the range, and that's the best part of this job, is being able to come in and taste the range as it's been developed and hear Bob's thought process as he's going through it. 12-year-old stole the show for me from the start, and as it developed, it got more refined, and he was just tuning it, but it never changed to take away from my favourite. It won silver at the IWSR, so we're really proud of that. So did the 10-year-old peat smoke, though. It was only two we put in, but they both came with a silver medal, 92 points out of 100, which to come out with that straight at launch was awesome for us. for me, I'm really, really proud that we've got something. I mean, this is a £60 price point, around about there on the retail selling price. But it's delicious, deliciously drinkable whiskey. It's presented at 46%, just that little bit of an edge above your 40s and your 43s. And the fact that we've got something that truly represents the Glenturret character and its smoothness and its lightness and its sociable nature at that price point, I think is perfect. You know, I'm so glad that people can, you know, be able to get a bottle and drink it and enjoy it. The 10-year-old and the 12-year-old, I think, are the two leading lights of our range, depending on your taste profile. But for me, it's the 12. That's my go-to.
Excellent. Well, John, thank you very much for telling us all about the distillery. I wish you best of luck. I say so far it looks like it's going well. Don't need me wishing you luck or anything. So keep up the good work, and make sure you occasionally push some lunch into Bob's room to make sure he keeps going.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, keep him going. He's a workaholic. He doesn't. He's just, this is his life. You know, whiskey is his life. He eats, breathes, and talks it. You'll get a phone call from him late at night as he's driving up the road back up to Monasher, because he's had a thought in his head and he just has to talk about it there and then. So it's a real privilege to work with him, and he's certainly helping us drive forward. Yeah, you mentioned the backing there. Yeah, we are really lucky again. You know, I was part of the sales process, so I saw all the different ways it could have gone. But to have owners who have acquired the Glenturret, are investing in its history and heritage, and not just looking at its volume, is really lucky. So I'm excited about the future as well.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot for having a chat with us, John, and we look forward to seeing what happens next.
Thanks, Billy. Take care.